My name is Clara, and for most of my 29 years, I learned to live in the quiet spaces left behind by my family's louder affections. I grew up in Oakhaven, a town of manicured lawns and unspoken rules, in a house where love was not a renewable resource, but a finite commodity allocated primarily to my older brother, Daniel. Daniel, now 32, was born under a lucky star, or so our parents, Eleanor and Robert, seemed to believe. He was the sun around which our family orbited. His victories on the hockey rink were cause for neighborhood-wide celebrations. His B- on a chemistry test was lauded as a valiant effort from an all-rounder. My own achievements, a prize-winning science fair project on plant genetics, a scholarship to a prestigious university, were met with a distracted, "That's lovely, dear." Before the conversation inevitably veered back to Daniel's latest triumph or trivial dilemma. I was not unloved, I told myself, just loved, quietly. I became an observer, a reader, someone who found solace not in the spotlight, but in the gentle shade of the library stacks. I learned to build my own world, brick by quiet brick. That world truly began to take shape when I met Leo in my final year of university. He was studying landscape architecture, a profession that seemed to perfectly match his soul, patient, nurturing, and dedicated to creating beauty. Visiting his family was like stepping into a different country, one where affection was spoken in a fluent and open language. His parents would ask about his day and actually listen to the answer. They remembered the names of my friends, celebrated my small successes as if they were their own, and hugged with an easy warmth that initially felt foreign and startling. Through them, I began to understand that I had not been loved quietly, I had been loved inadequately. Leo and I married 3 years ago. He designs parks and gardens that feel like poetry, and I work as a children's librarian in our small city of Riverbend, a place of cobbled streets and a slow-moving river that gives the city its name. We bought a cozy little house with a rambling garden, a 40-minute drive from my parents' world in Oakhaven. The distance was a carefully measured buffer, a space for my own life to breathe, though I told Leo it was simply a good compromise for our commutes. When we told his parents we were pregnant, they wept with joy. A flurry of books on mindful parenting, hand-knitted blankets, and excited phone calls followed. When I told my parents, my mother's response was, "Oh, how nice for you, Clara." Did I mention Daniel is being considered for a partner track at his firm? They came to the baby shower Leo's mother threw for us, but they spent most of the afternoon cornering guests to talk about Daniel's recent trip to Iceland. Daniel's life was a series of ever-escalating successes. After university, he joined a fast-paced tech startup, bought a sleek loft in the trendiest part of the city, and dated a succession of women who were as polished and ambitious as he was. Our parents had helped him with the down payment on his loft, a gesture never extended to me when I was struggling with student loans. When I once gently broached the subject, my mother had waved a dismissive hand. "Daniel has a certain image to maintain for his career, Clara. You and Leo are so much more grounded." It was a backhanded compliment, a way of saying my life was smaller, my needs less important. Our daughter, Lily, was born on a crisp October morning, just as the leaves along the river were turning to gold. She had Leo's dark, curly hair and my gray-blue eyes. The first time I held her, a fierce, protective love bloomed in my chest, so vast and intense it felt like it could power a star. Leo's parents were at the hospital within the hour, their faces streaked with happy tears. My parents visited the following afternoon. They stayed for 37 minutes, my mother checking her watch twice before announcing she had a standing appointment at her salon. In the 6 months that followed, Leo's parents were a constant, gentle presence in our lives. They would drive over on a Tuesday just to hold Lily while we took a nap, or bring a home-cooked meal on a Friday so we could have a date night on our own couch. They documented every milestone in a thick, leather-bound album: Lily's first smile, her fascination with the rustling leaves outside her window, the first time she tasted sweet potato and made a hilariously disgusted face. My parents visited once more on their way to a wine-tasting event a few towns over. They held Lily with a kind of stiff formality, as if she were a fragile, borrowed ornament, and seemed visibly relieved when she began to fuss, and I took her back. I kept sending them pictures and videos, small digital offerings of my daughter's burgeoning life. My mother would sometimes reply with a single heart emoji. My father rarely replied at all. 2 months before Lily's world went silent, Daniel announced his engagement to Isabel, a sharp, successful lawyer he'd been seeing for just under a year. My mother immediately threw herself into a whirlwind of party planning. The engagement party was to be a grand affair, a catered garden party at their Oakhaven home. The date she chose was the same Saturday we had scheduled Lily's dedication at our church, a small, intimate ceremony to welcome her into our community. I had already spoken to my parents about it. They had said they would be there. When I reminded my mother of the conflict, her voice was laced with impatience. "Oh, Clara, we can't possibly miss this for Daniel. An engagement is a once-in-a-lifetime celebration. You understand. A baby's dedication is also a once-in-a-lifetime event," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "It's a different scale of importance," she said, as if it were a simple matter of fact. "We'll be at the party. It's for the best." I hung up the phone, the familiar ache of being secondary settling in my chest. A week before she died, Lily came down with a small sniffle. Her nose was runny, her breathing a little congested. Our pediatrician, a kind woman named Dr. Evans, assured us it was just a minor virus, common in infants. I took a few days off from the library anyway, content to spend them in the rocking chair, with Lily's warm, sleepy body nestled against my chest, her tiny breath soft against my neck. By the weekend, she was her cheerful self again, her gummy smile a constant source of wonder. I didn't know that those quiet days of rocking and reading board books aloud would be our last. It happened on a Tuesday night. The air was still and cold. We had a peaceful evening. Leo gave Lily her bath, and she'd splashed with joyous abandon. I'd given her the last bottle of the night, humming a lullaby as her eyelids grew heavy. We tucked her into her crib around 8. We watched a movie, the volume low, and went to bed ourselves around 11. The baby monitor on my nightstand was a silent, unblinking eye. Too silent. My internal clock woke me at 5:30, just before my alarm. Lily usually stirred around 5 for a feeding. A thread of unease pulled me from my bed. I padded down the hallway to her nursery, a room we had painted the color of a pale sunrise and decorated with hand-painted watercolor animals. In her simple wooden crib, the one Leo's father had helped him assemble, Lily was still. A terrifying, unnatural stillness. "Lilybug," I whispered, my hand reaching out to touch her cheek. It was cool. Not just cool. Cold. The moments that followed are a fractured mosaic in my memory, a scream tearing from my throat that didn't sound like my own voice, Leo's feet pounding down the hall, his desperate, shaking hands beginning CPR on our daughter's impossibly small chest. My fingers fumbling with my phone, the 911 dispatcher's calm voice a bizarre counterpoint to the chaos in my heart, the wail of sirens shattering the peace of our quiet street, the grim, compassionate faces of the paramedics, the frantic, sterile world of the emergency room. And then, the words, delivered by a doctor whose kind eyes were filled with a sorrow that couldn't touch my own. "I'm so very sorry. It appears to be sudden infant death syndrome. There was nothing you could have done." Leo sagged against the wall, a choked sob escaping him. I stood frozen in a block of ice, the doctor's words echoing in a vast, empty space inside me. It couldn't be real. We had done everything by the book. She slept on her back in an empty crib. No blankets, no bumpers. We had followed every single guideline. SIDS was a monster that happened to other people in other stories. They asked if we wanted to hold her one last time. We spent hours in that quiet room with our daughter, memorizing the curve of her ear, the tiny crescent moons of her fingernails, kissing her cool forehead. The hospital chaplain came and spoke of angels. A grief counselor gave us pamphlets. The words washed over me, meaningless. At some point, I remembered my family. My hands trembled as I dialed my mother's number. "Mom," I managed, my voice a raw, broken thing. "It's Lily. She died last night. In her sleep. They're calling it SIDS." There was a beat of silence. "Oh, Clara," she said. Her tone was one of mild dismay, as if I'd told her I'd broken a vase. "That's just awful. We have to plan a funeral," I whispered, desperate for her to rise to the occasion, to be the mother I so desperately needed in that moment. "Yes, I imagine so," she said. "Well, let us know what you decide." That was all. No offer to come, no questions about our well-being. Leo's parents, by contrast, were already in the car, having left their home in the pre-dawn darkness the moment we called. The next few days were a fog of impossible decisions and crushing grief. Leo and I were ghosts haunting our own home. His parents moved quietly around us, handling the logistics that were beyond our capacity, calling the funeral home, notifying family, organizing food to be brought to the house after the service. My parents called once. My mother. "So, when is the service?" she asked. "Friday morning," I told her. "At 11. Willow Creek Cemetery." "Friday," she repeated, and I heard the faint sound of pages turning, likely her planner. "Oh, dear. That's the day of Daniel and Isabel's garden party. We're so committed to that, Clara. The caterers, the guests." I was sure I had misheard. "Mom, this is Lily's funeral. Your granddaughter's." "I know that, dear, and it's a terrible shame about the timing. But we can't possibly cancel on Daniel. Everyone is expecting us. You see that, don't you?" I didn't see. My mind couldn't form a picture of a world where this choice was logical. "No," I said slowly. "I don't see. Can you please explain it to me?" She sighed, a sound of profound irritation that crackled through the phone. "Clara, I know you're emotional right now, but try to be reasonable. A life that's just beginning, like Daniel's new life with Isabel, should take precedence over one that has ended. It's sad, terribly sad, but Lily was only with us for a few months. You and Leo are young. You can have other children. This party is important for Daniel's future, for his connections. A life that's just beginning, over one that has ended." The words were a quiet, surgical strike, more devastating than a scream. In that instant, the last fragile thread of hope I'd held for my parents' love snapped. The pain was so immense it burned away, leaving behind a cold, diamond-hard clarity. "I understand," was all I could say. I hung up the phone. Leo found me on the floor of the nursery, staring at the empty crib. When I repeated my mother's words, his face, already pale with grief, darkened with a rage I had never seen before. He wanted to call them, to unleash a torrent of fury, but I placed a hand on his arm. I felt hollowed out, beyond anger. "It doesn't matter," I said, my voice flat. "It's always been this way. I just refuse to see it." The day of the funeral was cruelly beautiful, the sky a piercing, cloudless blue. Lily's casket was a small, white box, adorned with a simple spray of pale pink roses. It looked like it should hold a precious doll, not the entirety of my world. Standing beside it in the Garden of Angels at Willow Creek Cemetery, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a film of someone else's life. Leo stood beside me, his hand of ice on mine. His parents flanked us, his mother weeping openly into a handkerchief, his father's stoic face a mask of grief. Our friends were there, colleagues from the library, neighbors. The space where my own parents and brother should have been was a gaping, physical wound. Our minister spoke of the brevity of Lily's life, but the immeasurable love she brought into the world. "Some souls," he said, his voice gentle, "are like shooting stars. They burn so brightly, but their time with us is short. We are not meant to question the length of their journey, only to be grateful we witnessed their light." During his prayer, my phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. Later, after the service, as people milled around offering quiet condolences, I glanced at it. There were notifications from Instagram. Daniel had posted a series of photos from his party. There was my mother, glass of champagne in hand, laughing with a group of friends under a white marquee. There was my father, smiling broadly, arm around Daniel. They were celebrating, just a few miles away, while we were burying their granddaughter. The finality of the burial nearly broke me. Watching that small, white box being lowered into the earth made it real in a way nothing else had. Leo's father had to steady him as he tossed the first handful of soil. Leo's mother held me as my own handful of dirt pattered onto the casket, a sound that will echo in my memory forever. Later that day, our house filled with the quiet murmur of friends and the scent of lilies and baked ham. I moved through the rooms like a somnambulist, accepting hugs and condolences. I kept catching myself listening for the phantom sound of Lily's cry from the nursery. Each time the silence answered, the wave of grief would crest and break all over again. After everyone had gone, Leo and I stood in the doorway of the nursery. The rocking chair was still. The mobile of felted stars and clouds hung motionless over the empty crib. We couldn't bring ourselves to dismantle it, as if preserving the room could somehow preserve her presence. A week later, my mother called. Her voice was breezy, as if no chasm had opened between us. "Clara, how are you holding up?" "My daughter was buried last Friday without her grandparents in attendance," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "How do you imagine I'm holding up?" "Now, there's no need for that tone," she chided. "We were just calling to invite you and Leo for Sunday dinner. Jason and Isabel will be there. We can all look at the proofs from their engagement photos. It will be nice for you to get out of the house, take your mind off things." Take my mind off things. As if the death of my child was a tedious chore I needed to be distracted from. "I don't think so," I said. "Clara, you can't mold her in that house forever. Life moves on." "It's been a whole week." "A whole week." The words hung in the air between us. I ended the call. For reasons I still don't fully understand, a morbid curiosity, perhaps, or a subconscious need for a final, definitive confirmation of what I already knew, I agreed to go to that Sunday dinner 2 weeks after the funeral. Leo came with me, his presence a silent, solid shield. The house was exactly the same, the air thick with the scent of my mother's lemon polish, and the roast beef she was making, Daniel's favorite. My mother greeted us at the door with her customary air kisses. My father nodded from his armchair. Daniel and Isabel were poring over a glossy wedding album on the coffee table. "Clara, Leo, you're here," my mother trilled. "Come, sit." Isabel was just showing us the resort they've booked for the honeymoon. "It looks absolutely divine." No one mentioned Lily. No one acknowledged the cavernous hole in our lives. The entire meal was a performance, a one-act play about the supreme importance of Daniel's wedding. They debated floral arrangements, critiqued catering menus, and planned the rehearsal dinner. On the mantelpiece, a new silver frame had appeared. It held a photo from the engagement party, my parents, Daniel, and Isabel, all beaming, champagne flutes held aloft in a toast. A toast to a new beginning on the day of my daughter's ending. I waited until dessert, my mother's famous chocolate silk pie. Then I set my fork down. "Was it a nice party?" I asked, my voice cutting through a debate about string quartets versus a DJ. The table went silent. My mother's smile faltered. "Clara, let's not spoil a lovely evening." "Spoil it?" I repeated. "My daughter is dead. Her funeral was 2 weeks ago." "A funeral you missed for this party." I think the evening was already spoiled. "Now, Clara," my father said, his voice taking on the stern, paternal tone he used to end arguments. "What's past is past. There's no point in dwelling. The past." My voice rose, shaking. "It was 14 days ago. She was your granddaughter." Daniel rolled his eyes. "This is why no one wanted to bring it up. You're always so dramatic." I stared at him, a cold fury rising within me. Dramatic? My baby died, Daniel. And my family, her family, chose a party instead of her funeral. It wasn't a party, my mother said, her voice sharp with defensiveness. It was a significant family milestone. We couldn't be in two places at once. You made a choice, Leo said, his voice dangerously quiet. He hadn't spoken a word until now. You made a choice and you chose this. And since that day, have any of you called to ask how we are? Not how we're holding up, but how we are actually doing. Have you offered to help with anything? Have you even said her name? A flush crept up my father's neck. Some of the relatives at the party asked where you were. We told them you couldn't make it. And they asked about us, why we weren't at the service. We told them my back was giving me trouble, and your mother had to stay and look after me. The lie was more shocking than the absence itself. They weren't just indifferent, they were ashamed. Ashamed enough to lie to our family, but not ashamed enough to have made the right choice in the first place. You lied, I whispered. Well, we couldn't very well tell them the truth, could we? My mother said, as if this were the most reasonable explanation in the world. People wouldn't understand. I don't understand, I said, pushing my chair back. And I don't think I ever want to. Leo stood with me, his hand on the small of my back. We walked out, leaving the half-eaten pie and the shattered illusion of family behind us. In the car, I finally broke, sobbing not just for Lily, but for the little girl inside me who had spent her whole life waiting for a love that would never arrive. The weeks that followed were a blur of grief, therapy, and tentative healing. Leo and I found a wonderful therapist, Dr. Sharma, who specialized in perinatal loss. In her calm, sunlit office, I began to unpack the tangled contents of my heart. When I told her about the funeral, about the lifetime of favoritism, she introduced me to concepts like family systems, the golden child, and the scapegoat. It was like someone had finally handed me a map to the confusing, painful country of my childhood. This wasn't just about Lily's funeral. It was about a deep, systemic pattern of emotional neglect, and Lily's death was simply the final, unbearable proof. What do you want to do, Clara? Dr. Sharma asked me one afternoon. I thought of my parents' casual cruelty, their easy lies, their utter incomprehension of my pain. I thought of Lily, whose short life deserved to be honored, not dismissed. I need them to see, I said slowly. Not for their sake, but for mine. I need to hold up a mirror to their actions and let them see the reflection, just once. Before I can decide what kind of relationship, if any, is possible, they have to face the truth of what they did. And if they refuse to look in the mirror, she asked gently. Then I'll have my answer, I said. And I'll know I have to walk away to protect myself. That night, curled up next to Leo in our bed, I told him my plan. Not a plan for revenge, but for reckoning. A plan to reclaim the narrative of my own life and my daughter's death. I'm scared for you, he said, his hand stroking my hair. Confronting them could make you feel worse. Worse than this, I whispered, gesturing to the hollow space in my heart. Worse than knowing they were drinking champagne while we were burying our baby? I don't think that's possible, Leo. He held me tighter. Whatever you do, I'm with you. For Lily. The first step was small but significant. The formal invitation to Daniel and Isabel's engagement party arrived a few days later, thick and embossed. I sent a simple text to the family group chat. Leo and I will not be attending. We are still in mourning for our daughter, Lily. The phone calls began almost immediately. My mother, my father, and finally, Daniel. You can't do this, Clara, my mother pleaded. It will look so strange to everyone if you're not there. What looked strange, I replied calmly, was your absence at your granddaughter's funeral. That's different. This is a happy occasion. I am not capable of happy occasions right now, I said, and ended the call. Daniel's call was the most telling. Look, Mom and Dad are really upset. Can't you just come for an hour? For them. Was being at Lily's funeral for an hour too much to ask? For me. He was silent for a moment. I barely knew her, Clara. The words were like a slap. And whose fault was that, Daniel? She was your niece. You held her once. I'm sorry, okay? It's a horrible thing that happened. But you have to move on eventually. You guys can try for another kid. The casual cruelty of it, the idea that Lily was a faulty product to be replaced, solidified my resolve. I will not be at your party, Daniel. Congratulations on your engagement. I spent the next month preparing, not for a fight, but for a liberation. I went through old boxes, finding report cards with glowing comments that had never been praised, photos where I stood on the edge of the frame, birthday cards signed with a cursory love, Mom and Dad. I laid it all out, not as an indictment, but as a validation for myself. I spoke to my Aunt Carol, my father's sister, who had looked so confused at the funeral. Your father's back was in a terrible state, she said when I asked. That's what your mother told me. I thought it was odd he couldn't at least sit in the chapel for a bit, but Robert can be stoic about his pain. He wasn't in pain, Aunt Carol, I said softly. He was at Daniel's engagement party. They both were. The shocked silence on the other end of the line was my answer. Finally, I felt ready. I sent a text to my parents. I need to speak with both of you. Alone. At your house. This Sunday at 2. My mother's reply was instant. Of course, dear. I'm so glad you're ready to move forward. I'll make a lemon drizzle cake. The assumption that my goal was to simply move forward without acknowledgement was the final piece of confirmation I needed. This wasn't for them. This was for me. And for Lily. I arrived at their house that Sunday, a framed 5x7 photo of Lily in my purse. She was laughing in the picture, a pure, uninhibited baby laugh. My mother met me at the door, all smiles and pearls. My father grunted a greeting from his armchair. The air smelled of lemons and denial. Cake first, my mother offered brightly. I'd rather just talk, I said, sitting on the sofa opposite them. I took the photo from my purse and placed it on the coffee table, facing them. I wanted to start by reintroducing you to your granddaughter, Lily. They both glanced at the photo, their discomfort palpable. This is the baby whose funeral you chose to miss, I continued, my voice low and steady. This is the child whose death you dismissed as less important than a party. And this is the culmination of a lifetime of being made to feel that my life, my experiences, and my feelings were less important than Daniel's. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply laid out the facts, the timeline of small and large slights, the financial disparities, the forgotten milestones. I told them about the lie they'd told the family. I showed them the time-stamped photos from Instagram on my phone. My mother began to weep. What do you want from us, Clara? What can we possibly do? I don't want anything from you, I said. I want something for you. I want you to see the truth. To acknowledge it. To understand the depth of the pain you've caused. We're sorry if you were hurt, my father mumbled, the classic non-apology. I'm not hurt if, I corrected him gently. I am hurt because of your choices. I then pulled out a letter I had written and spent 2 days perfecting. I'm going to read this to you, I said. And then I'm going to leave. What happens next is up to you. I read the letter aloud. It detailed the pain of their absence, the cruelty of their words, the crushing weight of their lifelong favoritism. It wasn't angry or accusatory. It was just true. It ended with, for the sake of my own healing and to honor the memory of my daughter, I need to step away from this relationship for now. I need space to grieve without my grief being minimized. I need to be surrounded by people who saw Lily's value, both in her life and in her death. If, one day, you are able to offer a true, unqualified acknowledgement of your actions and are willing to do the work to change this dynamic, then perhaps a new kind of relationship can be built. Until then, I have to say goodbye. When I finished, there was a heavy silence in the room. My father sat like a man carved from stone, his jaw tight. But my mother was looking at the photograph of Lily on the table. Really looking at it, for what felt like the first time. She has your eyes, she whispered, her voice thick with tears. Yes, I said. She did. You can't just cut us off, my father blustered, his old authority returning. After everything we've done for you. Robert, stop, my mother said, her voice sharp. She didn't take her eyes off the photo. I stood up and put the letter and the photo back in my purse. I've said what I needed to say. The choice is yours. I walked to the door, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilarating freedom. As I left, I heard my mother say my name, a broken, pleading sound. I didn't turn back. I had spent my life turning back, hoping for a different outcome. This time, I kept walking. The months that followed were a time of quiet reconstruction. My aunt and a few cousins reached out, offering apologies on my parents' behalf and their own unwavering support. Daniel, to my astonishment, showed up at my door one afternoon with a small rose bush, its blossoms the same pale pink as the flowers on Lily's casket. "I've been a self-centered jerk," he said, not meeting my eye. "I never saw it from your side. I'm sorry, Clara. For everything, but especially for not being there for you. For Lily." We planted the rose bush together in the corner of the garden we were turning into a memorial for her. It was a start. My parents remained silent for 2 months. Then, a letter arrived. It was from my father. His handwriting was shaky. It was a short letter, not eloquent, but in it, he wrote the 2 words I had waited a lifetime to hear. "I'm sorry." He didn't make excuses. He didn't qualify it. He just said he was sorry for the funeral and for not being the father I deserved. A week later, a package came from my mother. Inside was a small, silver locket. One side held a tiny, perfect engraving of a lily. The other was empty. The note said, "This is for you to fill with a new joy, when you are ready. I will spend the rest of my life regretting that I did not treasure the first one enough. Please forgive me." It wasn't a magic wand. The pain of losing Lily will be a part of me forever. The scars from my childhood are still there. But the letters, the rose bush, the quiet apologies, they were a balm. They were the beginning of a new foundation, one built not on obligation or denial, but on the fragile, hopeful ground of truth. Today marks 1 year since we said goodbye to Lily. This morning, Leo and I sat in her garden. The pink rose bush is thriving. We talked about her, sharing memories of her laugh, the way she gripped our fingers. The grief is still a current in the river of my life, but it no longer threatens to pull me under. I have found a way to swim alongside it. Our healing has been a quiet, deliberate process. We see Dr. Sharma every few weeks. I volunteer at a local organization that supports parents who have experienced infant loss, my personal story a bridge to others lost in their own fog of grief. My relationship with my family is tentative, like a sapling in new soil. We have dinner once a month. The conversations are sometimes stilted, but they are honest. We speak of Lily often. Her name is no longer a forbidden word. Last night, Leo turned to me in the dark. "I was thinking," he said softly, "that this house has more love in it than we have people to give it to." I knew what he was asking. And for the first time, the thought of another child didn't bring a tidal wave of guilt and fear. It brought a flicker of hope. Not a replacement for Lily. Never that. But an expansion of our family, a new chapter in a story that I once thought was over. I lost my daughter, and in doing so, I nearly lost myself. But in the silent, empty spaces her absence left behind, I found my own voice. I learned that setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty, but an act of self-preservation. I learned that true family is not about blood, but about who shows up to hold your hand in the darkness. And I learned that even after the most devastating loss, in the soil of the deepest grief, something new can and will begin to grow.